Hi, my name is Sarah, and I'm doing a project for Arizona State University's Class 360 Animal Physiology project. And I'm going to be talking about serotonin, in particular serotonin and depression and anxiety. They're some of the most common mental disorders in the United States, and the most common medication used to treat them is an SSRI, or a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor medication. So a little bit about what depression is. So depression is depressed mood or loss of interest in usual activities over a long stretch of time. It also causes significant impairment in one's life, causing them to not want to go to work, not interact with their friends, and withdraw from family and friends. The next most common mental disorder is generalized anxiety disorder, or an anxiety disorder, and that's characterized by consistent worrying or fear or panic, or the combination of all those over a consistently long period of time. People with generalized anxiety disorder also have trouble with restlessness and being able to sleep or sleep too often and too much. Very common that generalized anxiety disorder and major depressive disorder happen together and can happen with other disorders such as post-traumatic stress disorder. Mental health is still something we're trying to work on in the United States, and we're still trying to work on how to not necessarily normalize these things, but to make it so that we talk about them so people can get the help that they need before things get too bad. Which is where selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors come in play, because that is usually the number one medication that people start with, besides for cognitive behavioral therapy and other kinds of therapies. So why selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, and what does serotonin have to do with our brain and our body to affect our mood so much? So what exactly is serotonin? Well, serotonin is produced from tryptophan, and you might know tryptophan as the sleepy hormone that you get from eating turkey on Thanksgiving. So tryptophan is an essential amino acid that we use to create proteins in our cells. Serotonin has an excitatory effect on the pathways for our muscles and an inhibitory effect on our immediate senses. So for serotonin, besides for mood and sleep, serotonin also controls our digestive system, and it helps relax the digestive system. It helps with our food intake, so you might notice when someone's depressed or anxious that their food intake can change, and that may or may not be related to serotonin. There's still research that's being discussed about that. Serotonin can also cause changes to your libido or your reproductive health, depending on how serotonin affects you personally and what kind of mood you're in, whether you are in a more anxiety or depressed state. It can change. Serotonin is found in the brain, and it's also found in the gut, and there's actually a lot of new research that is being done about the serotonin that's in our gut and how we can affect that, and if it'll affect our mood, our digestion, and our overall microbiome that lives in our gut. Alright, so a little bit about how selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors work. So first you start with your neuron, so you have a presynaptic nerve ending, and that is where the serotonin is released, and it sits right there in this receptor site, where then eventually it is taken back up by a inhibitor. So what a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor does is it blocks that reuptake inhibitor so that it sits around in those receptor sites more. That way your brain can take in more serotonin. This, in theory, should make you feel better since your brain is being exposed to more serotonin. However, it's being shown that this doesn't exactly work in mild cases of depression, which has led to a lot of controversy with SSRIs. Is it a placebo effect, or is it actually doing something? And it's a big question right now. So there's actually a bunch of different SSRIs out there, but they pretty much all act on the same thing. So there's citalopram, which is mainly for depression. You have fluoxetine, which can be actually for a bunch of different things, so panic disorder, depression, and anxiety. You have Paxil, which does depression, and it's really good for anxiety. And sertraline, which focuses on depression, OCD, and is actually the safest one to take if you're pregnant, and it's in general not recommended to take any SSRI if you are pregnant, as it's known to cause birth defects. The big important thing when it comes to this topic of science is how neurons work. So Neurons relay signals throughout our entire body. It starts from the brain all the way down through our bodies, depending on which neurotransmitter we're talking about, and in this case we're talking about serotonin. So serotonin relays signals in between nerve cells, and it regulates the intensity. And they mainly find that it helps the central nervous system, so it plays a role in the central nervous system, and it is especially important in the gastrointestinal tract. Serotonin is a neurotransmitter, and it'll start in the neurons and flow all the way down through the body depending on the neurotransmitter and where it's needed and where it's used. Serotonin is mainly used for your stomach, your GI tract, your mood, your central nervous system. Serotonin is known as the feel-good chemical because it envelops your sense of well-being. Serotonin also plays a great role in digestion and is known for relaxing the stomach and in relaxing the intestines. An interesting fact is when you experience food poisoning or anything that your stomach dislikes, it'll increase its serotonin production so that it can help relax and release that food. It helps, serotonin when you get food poisoning helps the food move along more quickly so you can get those toxins out, whether it's through the digestive tract or it's back up the other end. You can have low serotonin for a lot of different reasons. One of the biggest ones is hereditary, and it can run in families. And you may see that depression or anxiety does run in families. The other thing is that your body just could not be using the serotonin correctly, depending on if the neurons are using it correctly, reuptaking it too fast, or not releasing enough. It's also possible to have faulty serotonin receptors, which could cause issues with your serotonin levels. Interestingly enough, low levels of vitamin B6 and vitamin D have been shown to have a decrease in serotonin levels, as those vitamins do play an important role in your serotonin levels. Tryptophan is the essential amino acid where serotonin is derived from, so if there's something wrong with your tryptophan levels, most likely there will be something wrong with your serotonin levels. So, you've been diagnosed with depression and you've been given an SSRI to start taking. Depending on the SSRI, you may take it in the morning or at night. Either way, the absorption will be the same, and you most likely won't need to take it without food. But always follow your doctor's instructions. So when it comes to the metabolism of an SSRI, after serotonin enters the small and large intestines, it'll then enter the liver. This is where the distribution and metabolism will begin. In the liver, there will be chemicals that start breaking down the SSRI medication. In this phase, the liver is going to use chemicals to make it more water soluble so that it can eventually exit the body. After then, it's going to go into the bloodstream and make its way throughout the entire body, interacting with different proteins and neurotransmitters until the serotonin finds where it wants to belong, which is in those neurotransmitters in the brain. The SSRI drug is going to interact with protein and fat molecules to make its way throughout the bloodstream and into those neurons. Once the chemicals have gone through the processes, they'll be excreted through the body through normal waste production. This is why it's important to take your SSRI at the same time every day, as it keeps your body regular, and it's really important that you don't miss your medications. A person's own metabolism can definitely affect how the medication works. This is why there's such a varying degree of different SSRIs and ways to treat anxiety and depression. Everyone's body's different, and everyone's going to react differently to the medication. How your cells metabolize the SSRI is really going to change how it affects you. I've talked a lot about how SSRIs work and how we think they work. Now, if an SSRI is supposed to immediately block that reuptake, then why does it take 4 to 6 weeks for an SSRI to work? And that makes a lot of people question. Things like LSD, Xanax, cocaine work right away, so why doesn't an antidepressant full of serotonin uptake inhibitors? Well, that's what researchers are working on right now. Research is being found out that antidepressants don't necessarily work on the actual neurotransmitter, but instead work on our genes and our DNA that use those neurotransmitters. Hence why it would take 4 to 6 weeks to work. It doesn't happen overnight, but slowly those genes will go in and tell those reuptakes to turn off. So it's not directly the antidepressants that's turning it off, but rather telling our genes that we need to turn off that reuptake so that we can keep more serotonin in those receptors. This is why it takes so long, because genes don't work overnight even though we wish they would. SSRIs are not perfect, and they do have a ton of side effects. Now, if you remember me mentioning that serotonin does play a role in your digestive tract, You may be right in thinking that serotonin changes your gastrointestinal tract and it affects your microbiome. A lot of times, people that take SSRIs may experience a lot of GI trouble, such as nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, constipation, pretty much anything you can think of. Usually serotonin is good at relaxing the stomach, so usually you're going to get anything more loose rather than a constipation. Everything that serotonin influences, an SSRI can cause a negative side effect. So like I had already mentioned, the gastrointestinal tract in your sexual function, but it can also play a role in your sleep, making you sleep more or less, and it can also cause a change in your metabolism, especially Paxil, and include weight gain. Sometimes weight gain comes from you feel better, so you just start eating, but it can also just change your metabolism and the way your cells metabolize things. When it comes to all these negative side effects, there's still a ton of research being done because we just don't know exactly why or how it happens. So a paper written by Irving Kirsch called Antidepressants and the Placebo Effect, we talk about the controversy of if SSRIs and antidepressants actually work or if it's just all a placebo. The placebo effect is very strong and it has been documented numerous times about the miracles that the placebo effect can create. People literally have cured themselves using a placebo. So, when it comes to an SSRI, the thought is that it fixes a chemical imbalance. Now, when we look at the original studies, it's actually found that a lot of those things, a lot of the positive outcomes that have come from an SSRI could be explained by a placebo effect. When we look at a double-blind study that is talked about in this paper, that is talked about in the antidepressants and the placebo effect paper, we can see that they have the same effect in the placebo as they do on the SSRI. Now, I don't have the numbers and the statistics in front of me, so I can't tell you if it was statistically significant for the SSRIs versus the placebos, but it does give you enough to wonder, is the SSRI doing something? Or is it just really a placebo effect? Also, it's very common to be in talk therapy or cognitive behavioral therapy when doing an SSRI. Now, it's hard to tell whether it's actually the therapy that's helping or the drug that's helping. Either way, does it really matter if it's helping you not be so sad and depressed or anxious anymore? More future studies will help us determine if the SSRI actually is doing anything or if it's really all in our heads. Either way, like I said, if the placebo helps you, it helps you, and there's nothing wrong with that. So lastly, I want to talk about antidepressants and what we can look forward to in the future. So it's recently been talked about that the gut is our second brain for our body. And the whole gut-mind connection is a really brand new thing in science. And this paper from Columbia University is pretty exciting to me. It's titled Effects of Serotonin and Slow-Release 5-HTP, which is a serotonin precursor, on gastrointestinal motility in a mouse model of depression. So what they've done is they created a mouse model that was missing the serotonin and 5-HTP precursor. What this caused was a mouse that was not only depressed, but also suffered from constipation. Now, they injected the 5-HTP precursor to serotonin into the mouse and found that so far it's increasing the serotonin in the neurons and helping those GI problems in the mice. And not only is it helping the GI problems, but it is increasing the mood of the mice and showing less symptoms of depression. This is super exciting news, as this means that it could be just as simple as changing our nutritional values, causing less side effects and making an overall happier mood. The idea of being able to use this slow release 5-HTP in our gut will allow it to transfer to our mind, through our bloodstream, and overall with less side effects, create a happier, healthier person. It's also going to be really useful for people who have GI upsets, as serotonin is a natural found in our body chemical that we can use to our advantage. Studying the gut and the microbiome is going to be one of the new big adventures of science, I believe, in this decade. Well, that's all I have for you guys today. I will have my resources and my references down in the description. And if you have any questions, please feel free to contact and reach out to me. I personally have some experience with this stuff because I take Paxil and I've done a lot of research for myself on SSRIs. And I've actually tried a few, so it hasn't just been one and done, but I've tried a couple. Anyway, I hope you had fun learning about SSRIs, and I hope to see you soon. Bye!